Hello everybody, welcome back to OMB Reviews. I am the critic who is a cynic. Hope you're doing well, and today I'll be doing a review of both the Blu-ray and also the film Women Talking. This is a film that was released last year. It got nominated for Best Picture at the Oscars and won for Best Adapted Screenplay, as this film is based off of a book by the same name based on real-life events, though according to both the author and the adaptation of the film, it is a work of fiction, a reality through fiction or something to that effect. And I will first talk about just the quality of the movie as far as its Blu-ray performance is concerned, and then we'll go into my thoughts on the actual film, as I think that there is definitely a separation between the two. When it comes to the movie itself, as far as its release is concerned, Universal, again, shout out to them for sending me this copy to review. This is indeed another one of these really good releases from Universal, where I'm glad that, of course, they have be able to actually include the packaging to have the slipcover on it. As far as the quality of the Blu-ray itself, it is very, very good. You'll get, again, a very good image, a very good quality to this film, and I think that you really kind of need that because the movie itself kind of ultimately falls apart, and that's really where my positive comments on the release of the film really end up being. So again, Universal, thank you for sending this to me, but I'm going to give my honest thoughts about the actual film itself. As it says, from the producers of Moonlight and Nomadland. That's right, from the producers of Moonlight, which I would say is probably the closest in the understanding of this film. Let's go ahead and pull up this window right here, because when it comes to my review of the actual film itself, I think that it's just very important to kind of look at, first off, this is the Metacritic score. I know that most people use things like Rotten Tomatoes or other places like that, but I think Metacritic usually gives a better assessment of what the actual score would be reflected of the critics, because remember, Rotten Tomatoes score is broken because people can give something a middling review and still call it fresh, and it's therefore not really representing exactly how people feel about the movie. And so this score of a 79 makes sense because this movie really honestly feels like it was made for critics, and critics who have the very similar opinions to the other people in the movie itself. So the general story of the film is about this group of Mennonite women, and it supposedly was one that took place in another country. However, this one is very much based in, at least it seems to be based off of their accents and the way they're talking. It seems to be something based in America. At one point, they show you a map, but it's hard to see exactly where on the map one is actually, where this actually is taking place. So this is, of course, one of these adaptations where they, again, take something that actually happened, and it's, again, a story that I think is important to tell because it's really, crazy what happened. But actually from this time period and time frame from around 2006, 2009, there was this group of Mennonites where the women were being assaulted, essentially. They were being drugged and then assaulted while they were being drugged, and 8 men actually in this community ended up being convicted of their crimes and being sentenced to a very long time in prison. But the movie, as the title indicates, focuses much more on women talking, and literally that is what the film is. It's a group of women coming together, trying to figure out, okay, this is what's going on, this is how they're being treated. Are they therefore going to stay in the community and do nothing? Are they going to stay and fight, or are they going to leave? And so for the next hour plus of the movie, it is just them talking. And one of my biggest problems with this film is actually the screenplay and the way in which it was being written, because the technical elements are actually there. I think the cinematography is done pretty well, though one of my criticisms is that when they finally move from day to night, it's clear that they're using filters at certain times, and it just always makes the image look that much more artificial and that much more fake. And you think to yourself, okay, we live in an era where shooting at night should be something that's relatively easy to do now. So the fact that they seemed to go ahead and use filters for that sequence to make things look darker when it clearly wasn't, or at the very least, that's how the look of the film ended up being, I think is something to criticize. But the screenplay is really where this film starts to fall apart because, and again, I have not read the novel, and so I can't say whether the novel does the same thing, but essentially it is this group of women talking, and they are saying the same thing over and over and over again. Everything that is being said, it's this circular argument, it's this circular conversation, and you honestly feel, you get to a point in their conversation where you say, wait, you've already said this point previously, right? They're coming up with pros and cons for all of the different things. There's a reference at the very beginning of them voting on what to do. And so, again, there's these random sequences of events, and then there's the core of the film, which is, as the name indicates, a bunch of women talking together about what they're actually going to come to the conclusion on, because apparently there is a tie in their vote about whether to stay and fight or whether to leave. And so those are the two dominating opinions. And they are using, again, this time to come up with the pros and cons, but they are repeating the same pros and cons over and over and over again in this circular way where you, again, get to a point, and it's almost like I've repeated myself, right? That's what the movie is. You get to the point where you're like, okay, this has been a complete and utter waste of time. And that's, again, my biggest problem with the screenplay is that it's very poorly put together. It's amazing that this somehow got nominated, let alone won, for Best Adapted Screenplay, though, of course, it's not all that surprising when you actually look at the screenplay itself and the subject matter in which it deals with, because even though this is an adaptation of a novel, and even though the novel is based off of true events, even from the very beginning, it says that this is, again, the work of female imagination. And so the entire conversation oftentimes will mention how, again, men are dominant within the society, how men are evil and are doing these terrible things. The only good man in the film, in fact, the only man really ever shown in the film, is a character named August. And he is a character that basically is about, as, again, obviously when it comes to masculinity and femininity, there are different standards in different cultures, but it's basically one of the most as far as what we typically would view in American society, especially as masculinity, most non-masculine characters possible, right? Sometimes you might even consider this character to be like a beta character where, again, constantly apologizing, constantly crying over various things. And so it's almost as if the way in which this script was being written, because, again, this is an adaptation based on true events, but not necessarily exactly what the events themselves were. It seems that they were trying, at least what the film director and the film writer, Sarah Polley, was trying to do, at least this is how it came across, was try to basically create this story or use this story of something that actually happened, right? Something that would have been better told by someone using a much more historical mindset versus this use of, again, the imagination to try to make up various things. And basically put in some modern politics and modern identity politics within it as well, right? Because, again, almost all men are bad unless you are like August, who also happens to be one of the only persons that actually got and went off to get a college education. So it's almost like, going off to a college is what allowed that person to be enlightened to the error of their ways and then allow them to basically seek apologies and basically just go around and do whatever it is that they were asking them to do during the course of this meeting. And so the commentary that is really within this film seems to be trying to say about how, what we found in this one area, in this one Mennonite society and community, is a microcosm of what actually exists within broader culture, broader society. It seems almost as if they're trying to say, right, that, again, when I was also looking to see, okay, this film is based in 2010, so it's actually not even historically where these events took place in the actual real story, the actual real history. So I was like, okay, I'm wondering if they're trying to get 2010 to match up a little bit closer to some of the events of the, hashtag Me Too movement, and it actually doesn't. So I'm actually would be interested to see why it is they chose 2010 specifically as to what this, was going about, unless that is the year that they decided to come together and have the meeting. All I know is that in my brief look into the history is that it occurred again between 2006, 2009, where the actual attacks themselves against this group of women. Because, again, that's an important story. I think that's worthy of telling. But when you're going to surround it with all of these, again, one, really terrible storytelling, which just has this very circular conversation, and also one of the main points in the film, and one of the things that they try to bring up is, only the boys get educated, right? The women don't get educated. And yet, when you listen to the women talk, it's very clear that they had some type of education with certain ideas and certain concepts that they're talking about things at a very philosophical level. So you're thinking to yourself, okay, clearly they've gotten some type of education. And there's this actually back and forth that happens where, August will say a certain word and then they'll respond saying, oh, well, how are we supposed to know that? We're not educated like you. And it's like, wait, then how are you even having these conversations and actually coming together with these plans and these ideas and these different concepts? And then also even towards the end of the movie that contradicts itself as well, because, August is trying to teach one of the women who he has, again, basically this, very much underlying a romantic relationship with in the film, trying to teach her how to navigate. And she's like, I already know how to do that. So it's like, okay, you've been educated in some way, even though you claim that you haven't been educated. So again, it's one of those underlying currents, and again, that's why it goes to the actual screenplay itself and the errors within the screenplay itself, as to what is one of the biggest issues with the film. Because as far as the acting is concerned, the acting is actually really, really well done. Frances McDormand, I think, is given a little bit too much attention, seeing that she is barely in the movie. Obviously, she is one of the biggest names in the film, but ultimately her actual, screen presence and screen time is very, very limited. And the movie is about an hour and 40 minutes long, and she seems to only be in about 20 minutes of the movie, and it's just in the very beginning of the film. And then when the actual conversations happen, she isn't really even part of those conversations for the vast majority of it. So again, the acting, I will say, is still very good. Cinematography, other than those coloration issues and those clear use of filters, is also for the most part pretty good. The score is pretty good as well. So ultimately, and again, the biggest part of any story, the most important part of any story is, or any movie rather, is the actual story itself. So the fact that it says inspired by true events, and there are these moments again where they mention that this is a work of fantasy as well, it's almost as if they're taking these real life tragedies and then trying to use them not to tell their story, not to tell their history, not to actually expose this terrible thing that happened, but instead to try to say, oh, there's this broader commentary on our own current culture and how basically things are almost no different whatsoever, and that there's a lot of similarities, right? You think about how you oftentimes will hear this, especially within culture and society, about how there's that grape culture, for lack of a better expression. And again, it's like, this insinuation that somehow there's this support behind it, when in reality, the vast majority of people, men and women, view that as being completely disgusting, reprehensible, etc. So again, it seems almost as if the director, writer of this film, Sarah Polley, is trying to push some type of agenda. In addition to that, and again, something else that I would be very interested to see, whether or not this character actually exists in, not necessarily in the book, but in the actual history themselves, is they at one point create a character who is a non-binary character, who is basically a trans character. And then when you look up the actual actress herself, the actress in the IMDb expression, goes by they. So it's a very much also modern implementation and modern commentary by having that character. And also, one of the key moments towards the end of the film is that this character does not talk to the women, and she is constantly called by her actual name. And then one of the women finally uses the name that she's made up for herself, and she finally talks to them and says, "Thank you for saying my name." So again, it's putting again this modern conversation, this modern political conversation into the film. And so ultimately this thing just falls apart completely. So I'm gonna go ahead and give this film a D+, because as I said, the story is the most important part, and the story is just not very well written. Again, the core story is interesting, and I would love to see someone actually take this real story and actually do something with it and actually take it from that historical perspective, because that, I think, is important. That is, I think, something that should be done. But instead, we got something that is as much fiction as it is truth, and the embellishment that happens to try to, again, apply it to modern day issues, modern day problems, and try to make some type of correlation between them, I think feels very, very forced, in addition to it just being downright boring because of the circular conversations that are being had, and that really ultimately comes down to really bad writing. And so can't say I'm surprised that they have given it high scores critically, that they even gave Sarah Polley an adapted screenplay Oscar, probably because of the fact that she didn't get nominated for direction, which, again, the fact that this film has gotten any type of awards consideration whatsoever is kind of, again, mind-boggling if you're looking at this just from an outsider's lens, but it makes complete sense when you keep in mind the political undertones of the film itself. And so again, a D+ for Women Talking. But I do again want to shout out and give a thanks to Universal for sending me this copy to review, because this is definitely a film, after having seen it, I can say I would never ever want to watch again, and would never have seen had it not been sent to me. So anyway, have you seen Women Talking? What are your thoughts about it? And if you think that I am wrong on any of these points, please explain how you think that I am in the comment section down below. If you like this video, smash that like button, loud that fire button, Aussie, and smash the rumble button. You're all amazing and beautiful people. Hope you have a wonderful rest of your day, a blessed feast of St. Patrick, and as always, God bless. And now for a huge shout out to all of my March Patreon, Subscribe Star, and local members at the Keeper of the Bifrost level and above. Starting off with Father Luca Illich, Garrett Searles, Chris from the 80s, who can check out over his YouTube channel by the same name, Jaimir Irie Hymason, Joe Horn, Jonathan Carney, Orange at Reviews, who can check out over at his YouTube channel, Laura, The Modern Major General Story, Rosetta Allen, who can check out at her YouTube channel, Eagle Writer, Miss Martin Muses, and you can check her out at her YouTube channel by the same name also. To my Subscribe Star members, Matt317, you can check out over at his Twitch channel, Matt317, Fast Reaction, The R, Mr. Roy, J-Rod, The Beer Guru, and the K-Man, who you can find out over at xtheboundaries.co. And lastly, to my locals members, Miss Minnesota Hockey Fan, How About a Hockey Player, J.H. Schwalbach, Brett D90, and the amazing lawyer, Robert Barnes. Thank you all very much for supporting me at the Patreon level, Subscribe Star level, and locals level of Keeper the Bifrost and above. If you want your name shouted out at the end of every live stream and every video, make sure to check out the top link in the video description to find out more ways that you can support the channel, including ways to get access to a podcast and also ways to get access to giveaways that I do on the channel, and also, of course, to my coveted Chosen of Valhalla level as well. You guys are all amazing and beautiful people. Hope you have a wonderful rest of your day, and as always, God bless.